The American Nightmare is living a nightmare, and the Scottish Warrior is the one holding the blade to his throat. But what if I told you that the weapon Drew McIntyre is using isn't just claymore kicks and brutal assaults? What if the real danger, the real threat to everything Cody Rhodes has built, is something far more insidious? What if Drew McIntyre isn't trying to destroy Cody Rhodes at all, but rather, he's trying to create something darker? Something that Cody himself might be willingly walking toward with every attack, every beatdown, every humiliating moment that pushes him closer and closer to the edge of something we never thought we'd see? The undisputed WWE Champion Drew McIntyre just struck again. Another vicious, calculated assault on Cody Rhodes that left the former champion broken, bloodied, and according to those who were there muttering words under his breath that nobody expected to hear from the man who promised to finish his story and be the hero WWE deserves. And buried in the aftermath of this latest attack are clues, behaviors, and reactions that suggest we might be witnessing the beginning of the most shocking character transformation in recent memory. A Cody Rhodes heel turn that would shake the foundation of everything WWE has built over the past 2 years. I know what you're thinking. Cody Rhodes, the company's top babyface, the man who left AEW to come back and finish his father's story, the wrestler who finally defeated Roman Reigns and captured the championship his legendary father never could, turning heel. It sounds impossible. It sounds like fantasy booking from internet forums. But after what happened this week, after analyzing Drew McIntyre's methodical destruction of Cody and more importantly, after seeing how Cody is responding to these attacks, I'm telling you right now that this isn't fantasy. This is foreshadowing, and we need to talk about it. Let me take you back to where this all really began, because Drew McIntyre's current reign as undisputed champion and his obsession with tormenting Cody Rhodes didn't just materialize out of nowhere. This has been building for months, simmering beneath the surface while everyone was focused on other storylines, other feuds, other narratives. Drew McIntyre has always been a competitor who wears his emotions on his sleeve. The man is passionate, driven, and when he feels disrespected or overlooked, he doesn't hide it. He lets the world know. When Drew finally captured the undisputed championship after years of being positioned as the perpetual challenger, the man who could never quite get over the hump when it mattered most, something changed in him. You could see it in his eyes during his championship celebration. This wasn't the joyful, grateful Drew McIntyre who won the WWE Championship during the pandemic era with no fans in attendance. This was a man who felt vindicated. A man who believed he'd been denied his rightful place at the top of the industry for too long, and now that he'd finally seized it, he wasn't going to let anyone forget what he had to endure to get there. But here's where it gets interesting. Drew didn't immediately target Cody Rhodes. In fact, for the first few weeks of his championship reign, Cody wasn't even in the picture. Drew was defending against other top contenders, establishing his dominance, proving that his championship victory wasn't a fluke or a lucky break but the beginning of a reign that would be remembered as one of the most dominant in WWE history. Cody, meanwhile, was navigating his own journey after losing the championship. And this is crucial to understanding what's happening now. Cody's loss of the title wasn't a clean defeat in the center of the ring where he could respect his opponent and move on. It was controversial. It was messy. There were circumstances that Cody clearly felt were unjust, but being the consummate professional, being the babyface that WWE needs him to be, he swallowed his frustration and talked about earning another opportunity the right way, about working his way back up the ladder, about proving that his championship reign wasn't a fluke but rather just the first chapter in a legacy that would span years. The crowd loved it. Social media ate it up. Cody Rhodes, the gracious former champion, taking his loss with dignity and vowing to reclaim what was his through hard work and determination. It was the perfect babyface response. Textbook wrestling storytelling. Except Drew McIntyre saw something different. Drew saw weakness disguised as nobility. He saw a man making excuses. And more than that, Drew saw an opportunity. The first time Drew attacked Cody, it seemed random. Almost petty. Cody had just finished a match, a victory actually, looking strong and building momentum toward earning another championship opportunity. He was celebrating with the fans, doing his signature moves, playing to the crowd, being everything that a top babyface should be. And then Drew's music hit. The Scottish Warrior walked out onto the stage, championship over his shoulder, microphone in hand, and he did something that caught everyone off guard. He didn't challenge Cody to a match. He didn't make threats about what would happen if they ever faced each other in the ring. Instead, Drew talked about legacy, about what it means to be a champion, about the difference between someone who holds a title and someone who embodies what championship excellence truly represents. His words were surgical. Drew praised Cody's accomplishments, acknowledged his journey back to WWE, even gave credit for defeating Roman Reigns and ending the historic title reign. But then, and this is where you could see Cody's expression change even from the wide camera shots, Drew questioned whether Cody truly understood what it took to remain at the top. Whether one championship reign, one crowning achievement, was enough to cement a legacy or whether it was just a moment that would fade into trivia as newer, hungrier, more dominant champions emerged. Cody tried to respond, tried to defend his legacy and his intentions, but Drew didn't let him finish. The champion simply turned and walked away, leaving Cody standing in the ring with thousands of fans chanting his name but with a look on his face that suggested Drew's words had hit their mark. They'd planted a seed of doubt, of insecurity, of frustration that would only grow in the weeks to come. The next encounter was more physical. Cody was scheduled for a #1 contenders match, a high-stakes bout that would have put him right back in line for a championship opportunity if he won. The match itself was spectacular, everything you'd expect from Cody Rhodes performing at the highest level. He was pulling out moves from deep in his arsenal, taking risks, pushing himself beyond normal limits because he knew what was on the line. He won the match. Clean, decisive, undeniable. The referee raised his hand, the announcement was made that Cody Rhodes had earned another championship opportunity, and the arena exploded with excitement. This was the moment fans had been waiting for. The rematch. The chance for Cody to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. Except Drew McIntyre had other plans. Before Cody could even leave the ring, before the celebration could really begin, Drew appeared. Not through the entrance ramp this time, but through the crowd. Like a predator stalking prey, the champion had been watching from the audience, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And strike he did. A Claymore kick out of nowhere that caught Cody completely off guard and sent him crashing to the mat. But Drew didn't stop there. He picked Cody up and delivered another Claymore. Then another. By the time security and referees managed to pull Drew away, Cody had been hit with 5 consecutive Claymore kicks and was lying motionless in the center of the ring while medical personnel rushed to check on him. The assault was condemned immediately. WWE officials made statements. Fellow wrestlers expressed their disgust on social media. Drew McIntyre was fined a record amount and suspended for his actions, though the suspension was later reduced because WWE couldn't afford to have their champion off television for an extended period. And Cody? Cody was taken to a local medical facility, diagnosed with a concussion, and forced to miss the next 2 weeks of programming. You'd think this would make Cody more sympathetic, more beloved by the fans, more clearly positioned as the hero in this narrative. And it did, to an extent. But something else started happening too. Something subtle that most people missed, but that becomes obvious when you look back at it with the context of everything that's happened since. When Cody returned from that attack, there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. His promos were still technically babyface, still focused on overcoming adversity and proving his worth, but the delivery had changed. There was an edge to his voice. A bitterness creeping into his words when he talked about Drew McIntyre and the championship. He started making comments about how being honorable and following the rules only gets you so far in a world where someone can attack you from behind and face minimal consequences. How maybe, just maybe, finishing his story wasn't just about winning back the championship but about proving he could be just as ruthless, just as willing to cross lines as anyone else when pushed to his limits. The fans didn't turn on him for this. If anything, they got more behind him because they understood his frustration. They'd watched him get attacked repeatedly. They'd seen him try to take the high road only to end up broken and bleeding on the canvas. The natural reaction was to support Cody's growing anger and hope that when he finally got his hands on Drew McIntyre, he'd unleash all that pent-up rage in a satisfying comeuppance. But here's what people weren't considering. Here's what Drew McIntyre might have understood from the very beginning. Cody Rhodes built his entire WWE comeback on being different. On being the wrestler who respected tradition, honored his father's legacy, and proved that you could reach the top without compromising your values or becoming the villain. That identity, that image, was central to everything Cody represented. But what happens when that identity becomes a cage? What happens when being the hero means constantly suffering while the villains thrive? What happens when the very qualities that make you beloved also make you vulnerable? Drew McIntyre, whether through intentional psychological warfare or just through his own desire to dominate and humiliate his rivals, was systematically dismantling the foundations of Cody's heroic identity. Every attack, every brutal assault, every moment where Cody was left broken while Drew stood tall with the championship, they all served to prove one thing: being the good guy wasn't working anymore. Which brings us to this week, the latest attack. The one that might have finally pushed Cody past the point of no return. The incident that has the entire wrestling world buzzing about whether we're about to witness the unthinkable. Cody was scheduled to appear on the show for what was advertised as a major announcement. Speculation ran wild. Was he officially challenging Drew McIntyre? Was he introducing a new ally? Was he addressing the rumors that he was considering leaving WWE again after everything he'd endured? The segment was given prominent placement in the middle of the show, and the live crowd was electric with anticipation. Cody made his entrance to a massive ovation. Whatever frustration or darkness might be growing inside him, the fans still love this man. They still see him as their champion, their representative, the wrestler who embodies what they want WWE to be. Cody stood in the ring, microphone in hand, and for a long moment, he just looked around at the arena, soaking in the reaction, processing the weight of what he was about to say. He started talking about his father, Dusty Rhodes, and how the American dream had taught him that professional wrestling was about connecting with people, about telling stories that mattered, about being someone that fans could believe in even when everything around them seemed designed to tear them down. Cody's voice was heavy with emotion as he talked about how carrying that legacy back to WWE and finally achieving what his father never could, winning the championship that had always eluded the dream, was supposed to be the culmination of his journey. But then his tone shifted. Cody started talking about what's happened since losing that championship. The attacks, the humiliation, the realization that in modern WWE, honor and respect don't protect you, they make you a target. He looked directly into the camera and said that Drew McIntyre had taught him a valuable lesson. That maybe his father's way, the way of the babyface who suffers nobly and eventually triumphs through perseverance, doesn't work anymore in an industry that rewards ruthlessness and punishes compassion. The crowd wasn't sure how to react to this. It wasn't quite a heel promo, but it certainly wasn't the inspirational babyface speech they were expecting. It was something in between, something uncomfortable and raw and real in a way that professional wrestling usually avoids. And that's when Drew McIntyre's music hit for the second time in this story, but this time, the reaction was different. This time, Cody didn't look surprised or caught off guard. He looked almost relieved, like he'd been waiting for this interruption, like he needed it to happen to justify whatever decision he was wrestling with internally. Drew walked to the ring, championship prominently displayed, with that smug expression he's perfected during his reign. He climbed through the ropes and stood across from Cody, and for a moment, the two men just stared at each other. The tension was suffocating. Everyone in the arena and everyone watching at home knew that violence was inevitable. It was just a question of who would strike first and how brutal it would be. Drew spoke first, and what he said was designed to provoke. He mocked Cody for the emotional speech. He questioned whether Cody was about to cry in the middle of the ring like his father used to do in his famous Hard Times promo. He suggested that maybe the Rhodes family was cursed to always fall short when it truly mattered, to be beloved by fans but never quite good enough to remain at the absolute pinnacle of the industry. You could see Cody's jaw clench, his fists tighten. Everything about his body language screamed that he was about to explode. The crowd was chanting his name, urging him to fight back, to shut Drew up with violence rather than words. But Cody didn't attack. Instead, he smiled. Not a happy smile, but something colder. Something that didn't quite reach his eyes. He told Drew that he was right about one thing, the old Cody Rhodes, the one who believed in honor and taking the high road, that version of himself clearly wasn't equipped to handle someone like Drew McIntyre. But fortunately, Cody said, people evolve. People learn. And people change when they're pushed far enough. Before anyone could process what that meant, before Drew could respond, Cody dropped the microphone and walked toward the ropes like he was going to leave the ring. Drew, apparently thinking he'd won this psychological battle, turned to play to the crowd and gloat about reducing Cody to a quitter who runs away from confrontation. That's when Cody struck. He spun around and caught Drew with a low blow that the referee somehow didn't see or chose not to call. Drew doubled over, and Cody followed up with a series of strikes that were more violent, more vicious than anything we'd seen from him in years. These weren't wrestling moves. These were punches thrown with the intent to hurt, to damage, to punish. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered because they'd wanted to see Cody finally fight back. Others seemed uncomfortable with the level of aggression and the cheap shot that started the assault. Cody didn't seem to care either way. He was laser-focused on inflicting pain on Drew McIntyre. He grabbed the championship belt that had fallen to the mat during the exchange and held it up, but not in the typical celebratory way wrestlers do. He stared at it with an expression that was hard to read. reverence mixed with resentment, desire mixed with disgust. And then he did something that sent shockwaves through the arena. He looked at the fallen Drew McIntyre, looked at the championship, and threw the belt down onto Drew's body before leaving the ring. The symbolism was unmistakable. Cody wasn't celebrating the belt. He was rejecting it, or at least rejecting what it represented. The idea that a championship defines your worth, that holding a title makes you better than those who don't have one. It was a statement, but what exactly that statement meant was open to interpretation. Backstage, according to multiple reports from people who were there, Cody's behavior after the segment raised even more eyebrows. Usually, after a big moment on television, wrestlers will talk to producers, get feedback, discuss what worked and what could be improved. Cody apparently went straight to his locker room without speaking to anyone. When a producer knocked on his door to check on him and discuss the next steps in the storyline, Cody reportedly said through the door, "Tell them I'll do whatever needs to be done. No limits anymore. No limits anymore." Those 3 words have been circulating among wrestling insiders and fans who follow Backstage news closely. What do they mean? Is Cody signaling that he's willing to embrace heel tactics to win back the championship? Is he telling WWE Creative that he's open to a full character transformation? Or is this just an exhausted wrestler venting frustration after weeks of being on the receiving end of brutal attacks? The evidence for a heel turn is starting to pile up beyond just this one incident. Look at Cody's social media activity over the past few weeks. He stopped posting the inspirational messages and fan interactions that used to dominate his accounts. Instead, there are cryptic photos, often black and white, with no captions or just single words like evolution or necessity or legacy. Fans have noticed. The comment sections are filled with people asking if he's okay, expressing concern about the change in his online presence. In interviews, when Cody has done them, he's been noticeably different. Less polished. Less concerned with saying the right thing to maintain his babyface image. When asked about Drew McIntyre, instead of the typical wrestling responses about wanting a fair fight and proving who's better in the ring, Cody has made comments about doing whatever it takes to win. About not being concerned with how he defeats Drew, only that he does defeat him. About understanding now that the only thing that matters in professional wrestling is winning and holding championships, and everything else, all the honor and respect and tradition, is just window dressing that holds you back. These might seem like small things individually, but when you put them all together, when you look at the pattern of behavior and the trajectory of this storyline, it becomes clear that something significant is happening with Cody Rhodes' character. And Drew McIntyre, whether by design or by accident, has been the catalyst for this transformation. There's a brilliant psychological element to this if you think about it from Drew's perspective. By attacking Cody repeatedly, by humiliating him and proving that being honorable makes you vulnerable, Drew has created a situation where Cody's only path to reclaiming the championship might be to become exactly what Drew is: ruthless, calculating, willing to cross any line to maintain his position at the top. And if Cody does turn heel, if he does embrace the darker side of himself, Drew will have achieved something more devastating than just beating Cody in matches. He'll have corrupted him. He'll have proven that his worldview, his approach to the business, is the only one that works in modern WWE. But here's the really fascinating question that nobody seems to be asking. What if Cody wants this? What if, on some level, he's been looking for an excuse to shed the pressure and expectations that come with being WWE's top babyface? Being the hero is exhausting. You have to always be on, always be inspiring, always take the high road even when it would be so much easier and so much more satisfying to just unleash and destroy anyone who stands in your way. There's a freedom in being the villain that heroes never get to experience. You can be honest about your motivations. You can fight dirty without worrying about disappointing fans. You can focus purely on winning without the burden of representing something larger than yourself. Maybe Drew McIntyre's attacks haven't been breaking Cody Rhodes. Maybe they've been liberating him from a role he was never entirely comfortable playing in the first place. Consider Cody's history. Before coming back to WWE, he had spent years building something different in AEW. He was a major star there, yes, but he was also willing to be more complex, more morally ambiguous than the straight hero character WWE initially brought him back to portray. When he left AEW and returned to WWE, there was this narrative that he was doing it to finish his father's story, and that required him to be the ultimate babyface because that's what Dusty Rhodes represented to most fans. But Dusty Rhodes, if we're being honest about wrestling history, wasn't always a pure babyface either. The American Dream could be manipulative when he needed to be. He cut corners when it served his purposes. He was beloved by fans because he connected with them emotionally, but he was also savvy enough to know that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to achieve your goals. Maybe Cody is finally embracing that side of his father's legacy instead of just the inspirational, larger-than-life persona. The fan reaction to a potential Cody heel turn would be absolutely massive. Right now, social media is divided. Some fans are adamantly opposed to the idea, arguing that WWE needs Cody as a top babyface because there aren't enough genuinely beloved heroes at the main event level. Others are intrigued by the possibility, excited to see Cody in a different role and curious how his in-ring style and promo work would change if he was freed from babyface restrictions. What's undeniable is that if WWE pulls the trigger on this, if they actually transform Cody Rhodes into a villain, it would be one of the most shocking character changes in recent wrestling history. This isn't some mid-card wrestler turning heel to freshen up their act. This is the man who defeated Roman Reigns, who main event WrestleMania, who has been positioned as the face of WWE's future, potentially becoming everything fans thought he stood against. And Drew McIntyre would be at the center of it all. The champion who didn't just defeat his rival but fundamentally changed who his rival is. That's the kind of heat, the kind of legitimate nuclear heat, that can make a wrestling feud legendary. If done correctly, if the storytelling continues to be this layered and psychologically complex, we could be looking at one of the defining rivalries of this era. The latest attack this week added another element that we haven't fully discussed yet. After Cody threw down the championship belt and left Drew lying in the ring, he stopped at the top of the entrance ramp and looked back. The cameras caught his expression clearly, and it was chilling. There was no remorse, no conflict, just cold calculation. And then he said something that the microphones barely picked up but that lip readers online have confirmed. He said, "This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning." Not the beginning of his quest to win back the championship, not the beginning of a rivalry with Drew McIntyre, because that's already been going on for weeks. The beginning of something else. The beginning of a transformation. The beginning of a new era for Cody Rhodes where he's no longer constrained by the expectations and limitations of being WWE's heroic savior. WWE has been playing this masterfully, giving us just enough to speculate wildly but not so much that the direction is obvious or predictable. They're leaving breadcrumbs for fans to follow while maintaining plausible deniability. If fan reaction turns overwhelmingly against a Cody heel turn, they can pivot and frame everything we've seen as a babyface finally finding his edge and willingness to fight fire without actually crossing over into villainy. But if fans embrace the darkness in Cody, if they're intrigued by this evolution and want to see where it goes, WWE can lean fully into the heel turn and create something truly special. The wrestling business thrives on these moments of uncertainty, when nobody is quite sure what's going to happen next. When the usual formulas and predictable patterns get disrupted by storytelling that feels fresh and risky. Drew McIntyre's championship reign has been excellent in terms of his in-ring work and his character development, but this feud with Cody, this psychological warfare that's potentially creating a heel turn for one of WWE's biggest stars, this elevates everything to another level. We're watching something special unfold in real time. Whether it culminates in Cody Rhodes fully embracing a villainous persona or whether he manages to defeat Drew McIntyre while maintaining his heroic identity through sheer force of will, the journey we're on right now is compelling television. It's the kind of story that makes people tune in every week desperate to see what happens next. It's the kind of rivalry that generates endless discussion and debate among fans. It's the kind of wrestling that reminds us why we fell in love with this insane, beautiful, dramatic art form in the first place. Drew McIntyre strikes again with another vicious attack on Cody Rhodes, and in doing so, he might have created his most dangerous opponent yet. Not just a man seeking championship redemption, but a man on the verge of becoming something darker, something more ruthless, something potentially unstoppable. The undisputed champion wanted to prove his dominance. He wanted to break Cody Rhodes and establish himself as the most fearsome title holder in WWE. But be careful what you wish for, because the Cody Rhodes emerging from these attacks might be far more dangerous than the honorable challenger Drew initially targeted. The American Nightmare might be transforming into something that gives everyone nightmares. And we're all watching, captivated, unable to look away, desperate to see whether Cody Rhodes completes this dark evolution or whether he finds a way to reclaim his heroic identity before it's too late. Either way, Drew McIntyre has accomplished something remarkable. He's made this personal. He's made this matter. He's created a story that transcends championships and matches and becomes about identity, legacy, and the fundamental question of who we become when we're pushed past our breaking point. If you're as fascinated by this story as I am, if you've been analyzing every interaction between Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes looking for clues about where this is heading, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think. Is Cody Rhodes turning heel? Should he turn heel? What would a villainous American nightmare even look like? And most importantly, can Drew McIntyre handle what he's created if Cody truly embraces the darkness? Drop your theories below, subscribe to Wrestling Apocalypse so you don't miss any updates as this story continues to develop, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll keep following the most unpredictable and compelling storyline in wrestling today.